Hi, I'm Celina Gonzalez, and I am a behavioral health manager at South San Francisco Kaiser in adult psychiatry, and I'm the manager liaison in La Clinica, our South San Francisco Clinica. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Go ahead, Patrik.
All right, thank you. My name is Patrik Karlsson. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and behavioral health manager in the Department of Adult Psychiatry at Kaiser Richmond. I feel incredibly humbled to be here today and appreciate so far all of the speakers. So thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Adrienne Addicott, and I work with Celina in South San Francisco. I'm a psychologist and also the director of mental health and addiction medicine in South San Francisco.
Great, thank you. And again, we appreciate you taking the time to join us and have a little discussion about how we can foster more programming within the Kaiser mental health system. And I wanted to just ask and see if you could each to share a little bit about the mental health programs that are at your respective site and what your role is in helping to foster mental health programming for BIPOC clinicians and BIPOC community members and our members at Kaiser. So again, it's popcorn style, whoever feels the bravest and wants to step forward.
All right, well, maybe I'll share a little bit about our Clinica Collaborative in South San Francisco. So we're a collaborative across 3 teams: the adult services, child and adolescent services, addiction medicine, and recovery. And our mission, again, is to provide or increase access to culturally and linguistically inclusive care for the Latinx community. And we do that by partnering with our adult family medicine doctors so that at the very beginning, they're typically the first point of contact for our community, right? They're doctores. So from the very beginning, the way we're talking about mental health services is warm and welcoming. And we staff our triage line. So our first place our patients call in our department with Spanish speakers, so that from the point of assessment, you are talking to a Spanish speaking clinician, which we found really improves the connection and engagement. In terms of our services on adult psychiatry, we have 2 groups. We have a mindful stress reduction group in Spanish, and we have a group we call Pláticas para el Bienestar. So it's a collaborative with our AFM doctors. It's a kind of a COVID support group for patients during this time, just building community, again, making it warm, decreasing stigma, and encouraging people to engage during this difficult time. And we have a group in child for parents of adolescents, and a group in our addiction medicine and recovery services, which has been longstanding and well attended, all run by very dedicated clinicians. So perhaps a little bit about my role. I like to think of myself first as a clinician in the Clinica program, and then as the manager liaison. I do see patients as well and run one of our groups in Spanish. And in our Clinica, we have elected to have a chair. So we have a rotating leader for our consultas, and I partner with our chair. I don't know if he's on, shout out to Al Ibarra if he is. And we collaborate on what are the findings, what are we seeing our community needing? How do we translate that into Kaiser friendly advocacy for more space, for more resources? And so there is a lot, it's a team effort to make these services happen.
Thank you, Celina. Patrik or Adrienne, would you like to share a little bit about your role within the programs that you're supporting?
Maybe I'll go next, since Celina and I are working together in the same clinic. And, you know, I have to take a moment to say, Jessica and Patrik, that it's actually really an honor to be on this panel with the 2 of you, because you and the Richmond Clinic are what we want to be. You know, Richmond and Jessica, your name always comes up are really the leaders in this area. And we had some comments in our clinic, we want to be like them. We want to be like Richmond. We want to be a place that's at the forefront with EID and really providing good care to all of our patients. So to that end, I see my role as kind of sort of the backstage problem solver, you know, what the experience is of the patient and how I can use my own leadership to advocate for the program, to advocate for resources, and to try to problem solve around barriers, you know, try to figure out, okay, what can we do to make this work within our system with the resources we have, and to really try to support that. So Celina and I work closely together and trying to figure out, you know, how we can eliminate those things to make it a really welcoming experience for our patients, and also to bring joy and meaning to the providers. I know that our team is very invested, and I think it brings them a lot of satisfaction, which also helps with retention as well as good patient care.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
Adrienne.
you. I'm hearing an echo here. Let's see if I can turn this down. So the first part of kind of what I wanted to talk about is really starting at the beginning, which is acknowledging kind of the privilege that I hold in the context of our healthcare system. As a white, middle-class, heterosexual, cisgender man, I bring that perspective into these interactions, and part of my job as a manager is to be able to know that I bring this particular perspective, and this perspective will unintentionally leave out certain experiences. So kind of looking at not if I microaggress, but when I microaggress, and to take responsibility for that piece, and take responsibility also for my own education. And I think part of this process has been about really figuring out for like my clinicians, how to be able to work from their perspective and amplify their voices in these different aspects of providing culturally responsive care to our patients. And in creating these programs, my job is to try to remove barriers. This is kind of what you were talking about, Adrienne, right? It's like ensuring that we create spaces within our clinic for clinicians to be able to have discussions about what patients are needing, discussions about what clinicians are needing, and also looking at our system as a whole and making an assessment about what are ways in which our system is excluding certain patients. And so I think about like, as a proposal is put forth, for me to be able to advocate on a leadership level about how to move that proposal through, how to be able to create schedules and new groups that are reflective of what my clinicians are telling me is important in terms of culturally responsive care. I think about intentional hiring as well in this process, right? How do I contribute to language diversity? How do I contribute to cultural diversity? How do I contribute to gender diversity? And something that has been a challenge for us is how do we then bring that into leadership positions as well, to have a connection in leadership, to be able to say, as a leader in healthcare, like how do we represent our communities? So we have La Clinica, and I think Celina, you gave a great description of La Clinica, and I think there's a lot of parallels. And I wanted to give a big shout out to Jessica Dominguez and La Clinica. For some of you out there, you may know that La Clinica won a R.J. Erickson Award, which is like this national award. And it was amazing to kind of see this program go from an idea to kind of part of our institution. I tease Jessica sometimes about being a diplomat, an ambassador to the region. But it's that kind of access to creative ideas that I think we as an institution need to do more of. When we have a great idea, to be able to connect to all the other clinics in Northern California, Southern California, and then across the US to say, like, we have a template for how this can work. The other piece which I would highlight is that with a program like La Clinica, they're also involved in hiring, right? So we can do interviews, but we want to make sure, like, if we hire someone who's going to be potentially part of La Clinica, we want La Clinica to be able to be part of that interview process, right? And I'm thinking about one of our hires. We were very excited about the credentials he brought and the experiences he brought. His first interview, and this is a provider who speaks Spanish, who identifies as Latinx, came into an interview with 3 white clinicians, right? 2 being managers, and what was that like for that person coming into our system? Is this kind of how we want to do our outreach? And so as part 2 of the interview, La Clinica stepped in and they did an interview. And that interview, I think, serves on one hand to be able to say, like, is this person somebody who would work well in the context of our team? And also, is this a way for this clinician to, or the second purpose of that is that the clinician gets to see what they could be stepping into by working in our clinic, to have this amazing support structure, to have this amazing place where they can consult on patients, where they can talk about creating programming, where they can talk about how events on the outside are impacting their practice, right? So earlier we heard, right, the idea of politicizing a space, right? And this is a way for us to just to acknowledge that we don't exist in a vacuum, that the events on the national level in politics, right, and that they really impact our day-to-day experience of doing the work, and especially when we were talking about providers in La Clinica or BIPOC staff, LGBT staff. The other program we have, and then I'll be quiet, is called AFIA, which is Affirmations for Our Ancestors. And this is a group of providers led by the fabulous Danielle Simeon, big shout out to her, delivering services to our communities from the African diaspora or Black patients. This is also provides a lot of the same kind of ideas behind the group. It's a support place for our clinicians. It includes clinicians from across multiple clinics in NorCal. It's a culturally responsive program. It does program development. And AFIA is a younger program versus La Clinica, which I think has just passed its 5th anniversary, 5th year in existence. So I'm going to step back now. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrik. I wanted to ask all 3 of you, can you share a little bit about how you support your BIPOC clinicians specifically with this culturally responsive work, given that, you know, I know Dr. Jennifer Milan said in her presentation, you know, we are the communities that we serve, so we feel things very deeply when we are serving our clients. We identify with them immensely. I just wanted to get a sense of How are you supporting the BIPOC clinicians in your respective programs?
One thing that comes to mind for me in South San Francisco, and I know we mentioned one of our child team therapists already, Alberto Ibarra, but he came to me and said, you know, I want to talk to you about why we need a La Clinica case consultation group. We have all kinds of case consultations in teams in our department. He said, I want to talk to you about why we feel like we need a space where we can be together, where we don't have to explain to other people what we mean, or you know, sort of the background of something. And kind of the context of also a place for people to be able to talk about what's happening in the world, how it's impacting them as clinicians, how it's impacting their patients. So that's one piece of our La Clinica, that there is a La Clinica case consultation. And actually anybody in the department is welcome to come. They have, you know, always said anybody can come, but that's kind of the space for folks to come together. I don't know, Celina, if you want to say anything about that or add anything to that, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just want to go back for a minute, if you don't mind, and just thank you, Jessica, and Patrik, because I think part of supporting our BIPOC clinicians and expanding services for our community is really building on the efforts that we see in other clinics too. So for example, Jessica, you've always been so open to share your successes, right? And the work that you're all doing. And I think that being able to refer back to that has made it possible for us to advocate more in our specific site. Hey, this was possible in one site. How can we make space in ours? And so it's like, you know, building on each other, and it really, at least for me, provides a sense of community, of comunidad, right? And so that we're all in this together. And so I think for us in our clinic, supporting BIPOC programming for our patients and for our staff, it starts with the accountability for remaining inclusive. So really looking at how are we, what are the needs of the communities that we're looking to serve? How are we providing those services? And are we looking critically at the barriers for treatment? We know that a lot of our BIPOC individuals don't often seek mental health treatment, and part of that is due to stigma, part of that is due to a history of maltreatment, especially in mental health. Part of that is due to having to navigate a system, often not in your own language, and a lack of representation in your services, so lack of culturally responsive care. And so I think that what Adrienne is speaking to really is key. It's trusting our clinicians and trusting their voices and amplifying, as Patrik said. What are their observations? What do they see as the barriers for treatment? What are our clinicians needing to be able to feel supported to do this work? And our case consultation is a huge part of being able to show up in line with our values day in and day out for our community. It's a space where we have a shared frame of reference, where we change the default, right? We're changing the default, and we're talking about experiences that we might relate to, as you said, Jessica, that we feel deeply, that we can relate to with our patients, feeling held, validated, and not having to justify in that moment. And so looking critically at all of the pieces of one's identity, looking at issues such as race, immigration, trauma, language, as a team, I think really strengthens our skill set and directly impacts the quality of services we're providing our patients. And I'd say in addition to that, having some autonomy to direct the services we're providing, having time, which is such a resource at Kaiser, right? Having unbookable time in your schedule to consult with one another, to reach out to bilingual, bicultural providers in other disciplines, like I mentioned, our doctors or health educators or early childhood providers, to really say, what are we all seeing? What do we all think might be needed? How do we begin to build that together? So having that autonomy to be able to provide services in line with your values, in line with what you think for your gente they'll respond to, I think also contributes to retention, provider well-being, and really we have such a dedicated team. So one other thing I'm going to say, and then I'll close off too, is that I really appreciate the way Adrienne, as our director, is so intentional in naming some of the very difficult things that are happening in our world and how they might impact our community and our clinicians. I think that the willingness to hold space for difficult conversations, to check in with providers, to be flexible in terms of schedules, what are you needing in this week to be able to show up the way you would like to, that's really key. And so I think it's looking at not just the productivity of providers in the clinic, but looking at everyone as individuals. So I think the values that you set the tone with in the clinic directly influence how providers relate to each other and then how we provide care.
Thank you, Celina. I know we have just a few minutes more, and I just wanted to put it out to all three of you or one of you, whoever would like to answer, but I know that there has been a lot of, throughout the region, that clinics want more of this type of specialty care, that clinicians want to provide this type of specialty care. And in a word or two, and I know it's hard to summarize in a word or two, what recommendations or what would you let other KP managers or other KP leadership, what are some final thoughts so that they can kind of think about how to foster this type of work at their sites?
I would just echo quite a bit of what Celina just said. I really believe in values-based leadership, and I think if you as a leader feel like equity, inclusion, and diversity is important, then you have to set the tone and you have to do the work. You've got to do your own personal work. You've got to create spaces in the clinic. You've got to listen to people. You've got to be open-minded. And I think that one thing Celina said, I think is one of the biggest barriers is, finite resources and figuring out, how to make sure people have time, because you can't innovate if there's not time to do it, right? And so we have a lot of competing demands, and I think it's really thinking in the long term. So in the short term, people may need to shift some of their time to planning and being able to collaborate with one another and other departments to create something. But if you don't give people that space, they're not going to be able to innovate. And also, it is so, and we said this before, but it's really good for provider well-being, and it's really good for patient care. So I think that's my biggest thing. Sometimes we have to prioritize one thing over the other in the short term to get to the place we want to be. So allowing time and being supportive of that, figuring out how to make that work, I think is one of the big things. And then living your values. If that's a value that you have as a leader, make sure that you're showing up in that way and continuing to evolve yourself in terms of supporting this work.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that's been said by Celina as well as Adrienne. Creating the space is really important. Setting the intention is really important, and doing the work ourselves in terms of like looking at what I bring to the table, given who I am and my social position and my position within the structure, advocating. And being willing to take a short-term hit for this long-term gain, right? Improve patient care, improve provider satisfaction. Also, for me, it's important to be open to being called in on things, right? Without being defensive in that position, being able to look at like, how do I maybe contribute to a system that is not serving all of our patients as well as we could be serving them, right? And over, it seems like I come back to this issue of like, the providers have so many wonderful ideas about how to improve care. And I want to make sure that I can keep those providers in our department for as long as possible, because the patients are echoing that their treatment has improved as a result of these groups setting into motion this program development ideas, setting into motion kind of supporting each other in this work, and setting into motion collaborating with the larger medical center. This isn't just like a psychiatry or mental health piece. This is really about, like, as Celina was saying earlier, about like health education is there, primary care, OBGYN. Right now, our peripartum mood team are actively working on how to support patients who are struggling with peripartum depression or anxiety, and looking specifically at the BIPOC population right within that, and providing like specialty care. To me, that's amazing. To me, that makes me happy to work in our clinic. Gives me a tremendous pride in our clinicians.
Well, I just want to say thank you again, Patrik, Adrienne, Celina, for joining us in this not so fireside chat, and for sharing your willingness, your apoyo, your support of this type of programming at our sites. And I really hope that other KP sites and KP leadership in general can really take this seed and run with it. So I appreciate you all. Thank you. And we will be transitioning shortly into our breakouts for our ongoing workshops. So thank you again for taking the time and participating. I appreciate you all.